All right, welcome everybody. My name is Sam Renaut. I am one of the co-founders of Sports Biz Camps. I'm thrilled to have three prestigious members of the Octagon family here joining us to talk about talent representation and maximization and all sorts of things that go on in the sports agent business. So I'm gonna, actually, I guess I'll switch the order up on this. I'm gonna set the stage a little bit and then I'll have you guys introduce yourself. So for the attendees, I assume you guys have done this several times now. You can have comments made in the chat on the side, which we will be taking a look at. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can. We cannot see you, nor can we hear you, but you can see and hear all of us. And as we get started, remember, and I'll remind you at the end of this, to check into your Career Explorer Pass program, do the Chalk Talk videos, do your assignments. There are scholarships to be won. So without further ado, Alyssa, I'm going to start with you. If you want to just say your name, title, and a brief description of what you do.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Alyssa Romano. I am the VP of Communications at Octagon, which means I work with the media and social media to tell our athletes' stories. I've been at Octagon for 10 years now. I was a student athlete in college. I played lacrosse at American University. And I work with all of our athletes, so our NFL players, MLB, WNBA, NHL, PGA, etc. There isn't a sport that I don't touch, so it's a really nice benefit of being at Octagon because we work with all different sports. And I'll give it to Scott.
Thank you, Alyssa. Hey, everyone. I'm Scott Horner. I'm coming to you live from Ashburn, Virginia. That's where I live. I work out of our McLean, Virginia office. McLean, Virginia is the headquarters for Octagon's Talent and Properties Group. So I work closely with Jen and Alyssa here on a variety of different projects, clients, mostly in the business development and speaking and revenue generating space. I went to Penn State and I'm a proud Penn State alum. And then I also teach in Georgetown's graduate program in the sports industry management major. So again, if there's any particular grad school questions or things like that we can help with, Alyssa was in that program. Jen teaches too, I believe still at NYU, right? Or
Definitely.
Okay, but anyway, if grad school is a topic we want to get into, we can certainly do that as well. So thank you for having me, and kudos to everyone for investing their time in this awesome program.
And I'm Jennifer Keene. I am a vice president at Octagon as well, working in talent and properties. My background is that I started at Octagon focusing on marketing for basketball clients, which at the time included clients like Chris Paul, Rudy Gay, and subsequently Steph Curry. Over time, I became more of a marketing generalist. And what that means is I would be responsible for, if you see an athlete or another celebrity in a TV commercial or in an ad in a magazine, I was the person behind the scenes that would be either pitching a brand to say, you know, use this athlete in your ads, negotiating the terms, and then making sure that the partnership went smoothly. And then a couple of years ago, I started also developing books for our clients. And in some cases, I do children's books. I think Elena Deladon is a topic we'll talk about today. And so I've done her children's book series with her agent, who's my colleague. But I've also done books that are more motivational, inspirational. So trying to teach you how to do something new. My path to this job is very much non-traditional. I'd studied psychology at Cornell University. I thought I wanted to be a school psychologist, and then I turned out to like other things better than psychology. And I've kind of found my way, not in a traditional way. So let that be a lesson to you. What you study isn't necessarily what you'll do as your career, and that's okay.
Great start. And I guess to be fair, I'll introduce my background since I'm sort of pulling double duty here as both the moderator and our Sports Biz Camps representative, but I also worked in the talent representation industry for about 7 years. I was a certified NFL agent. It was kind of where I cut my teeth in the sports industry early on. So worked at a couple different agencies, represented a bunch of different NFL guys on both the team contract side as well as their marketing and endorsement and philanthropic initiatives. So with that being said, thank you all so much for being here. I'm really excited about what we're going to cover here. And again, to set the stage a little bit, we are mostly talking with high school students, and I believe we have a few college freshmen in here as well. So the goal is to help them understand pathways to this industry, which we all know are not linear. There's a lot of different ways to make it, but I think there'll be some themes that we'll keep on hitting on about work ethic and networking and all of that. So we're excited to hear what you guys all have to say about that. But so to get us started, Alyssa, I'm going to come back to you. Put yourself back, high school Alyssa. What were you thinking about at that time? What did you want to do, and what were you doing in order to move forward in your sort of personal and professional development?
So I had always known I wanted to play a college sport. I played field hockey and lacrosse in high school. I had offers to go to college to play both or to play one. Lacrosse was always my passion. So for me in high school, it was just trying to figure out what offers I was going to take, what made sense for me. I had a last minute decision. The coach who recruited me to the school I was going to go to, Loyola, decided to give my scholarship money to somebody else before I signed the papers, which was really difficult to hear. Ended up going to American, which was the best decision academically for me as well. Their communications program was tremendous. But in high school, I didn't even know what the sports industry was, aside from like coaches and broadcasters. So I think it's tremendous that all of you guys are able to listen to us. I think I wanted to be a gym teacher and a marine biologist, all very different jobs. But yeah, for me, it was really driven by my sport that I wanted to play at the next level.
Great. Scott, how about you?
So I'm from York, Pennsylvania, and kind of heading into my senior year, I had the opportunities to play football at some smaller D3 schools. So that was a decision that I was looking at, but then just wanted to apply to a broad range of schools. And right, being a boy growing up in Pennsylvania, right, Penn State is always kind of like emblematic and something that you look towards. So I applied there, investigated the football route, and then actually ended up going to a game the fall of my senior year at Penn State, and I was like, this is where I belong. Like it was just it was a no-brainer. So gave up the playing football path and went to Penn State. And interestingly enough, and I don't know if it applies to everyone listening, but I chose to go my freshman summer. So I went to Penn State and enrolled probably 2 weeks after I graduated, which was a tough decision. First of all, I think it really helped me get in the school, even though I had good grades, but they are always looking for people to go early. And secondly, I was like, I can sacrifice a summer for the chance. Again, I was going to a big school with a lot of students, so the chance to get 2 classes under my belt, to meet people, to understand the lay of the land. Summer at college is definitely a little bit slower, right? So you just get a grasp of things way more easily and quickly. So looking back on my career and some of the choices I made along the way, that was by far one of the best ones I've made, to choose to go that early. Because again, it just set me up for success and then propelled me. Because I remember telling my parents, going back for my freshman fall, I was like, Mom, Dad, I'm not nervous. I'm not concerned. I know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing. I have all these friends already. It was just such a relief heading back to such an important moment in my life. So again, if anyone can take anything from that, it worked for me, and it was a great decision.
I didn't know those things about either of you, so this is great.
Learning something.
My path was a little bit different. I'm also from Pennsylvania, but from the northeast corner of the state near Scranton. And so Penn State was the only other school that I applied to. And I was more in the arts. I was a dancer. I was also a cheerleader, but I never played sports. And so there's another, bit of irony to me having the career that I do. But I was really having a hard time making decisions about whether to stay close to home for college. I knew I wanted to have the experience of living in a dorm and being somewhat away. But did I want to go to UCLA in a big school, or did I want to go to Bloomsburg or Muhlenberg or another one of the, kind of well-known liberal arts schools in my home state? Ultimately, I made a pretty last-minute visit to Cornell at the recommendation of a family friend and just fell in love with it. I liked that it was a little bigger than some of the other schools that I had visited, but it also wasn't as overwhelming as, I looked at UVA at one point. And coming from a small town, and I'm an only child, so I just, a lot of that felt very overwhelming at the time. I knew academically I was like, I'll figure it out, but I ended up applying early decision to Cornell, and so when I got in, essentially my decision was made for me.
I'm a Virginia Tech grad myself, so I'm lamenting the loss of our Penn State matchup this fall. I was really excited
Yeah,
about that.
I know.
But your story is similar to mine in choosing Virginia Tech. I was applying to colleges when Michael Vick was taking Tech to the championship, which didn't end up going so well at the end. But it showed me the power of what sport can do for people, and the influence and the impact that even a single athlete can have on an entire community. I mean, that Blacksburg has never been the same since he was there. And of course, he's hit on some of his controversy over the coming years, but what he did for that campus and what he did for my life and encouraging me to go there, which I think was the best decision I could have made for myself. It's incredible to see what you can do when you can harness the power of an athlete's platform. And so I think that's what makes what all of you guys are doing today so critically important. So I appreciate that. It's good to learn about and kind of where you all come from. Alyssa, I want to come back to you, and I just want to get this out of the way because I'm anxious to hear about it. You're working with a prominent WNBA player who's facing some challenges right now. What has prepared you to deal with this sort of, like, you're at odds with something that's really important to your client? How do you go through that?
Yeah, so for a bit of background, if you haven't been following, the WNBA denied a medical exemption for Elena Delle Donne, who was the MVP from 2019, to not go, or they're saying that she has to go to the WNBA bubble, the wubble, as we're calling it, down in Florida. Elena battles Lyme's disease. She's had it for a long time. The biggest question mark and why the league declined her medical exemption is because chronic Lyme's disease is highly debated in the medical community. Doctors can't agree upon it, and the doctors that were put together from the league and the Players Association didn't come to enough evidence that chronic Lyme was a reason for not going down there, and didn't believe that it was compromising her immune system, because when you have a compromised immune system, you are more likely to contract COVID, and it does a number on you when you have a compromised immune system. So sharing that background, we found out that the league declined Elena's medical request yesterday, and the way that media has shifted now, right, you can use your platform and use social media to tell your story. Or you could use traditional media, sitting down with a reporter. There's some other platforms like Uninterrupted or the Players Tribune that, really help shape the athletes' voices, but still in their own words. So I've worked with the Players Tribune since the day they started in 2015. I always believed in it. I thought it was a really great idea. The best thing about the Players Tribune is they listen to the athlete and then write it out in a way that it's still their voice, but athletes aren't writers, right? So they're not the experts in that way. So, and then the athlete always has the ability to edit the story, and they're the ones that hit send to go to the public. So Elena had a lot of thoughts yesterday. There's also a lot of rules around what you can share, like your medical history. There's a lot of privacy laws and that kind of stuff. So when it comes to how have I prepared for this, I've had some situations, but not this extreme, but about medical history that you can and cannot share. The other thing is I know Elena so well. Myself and her agent, Erin Keene, have worked with her since she won the MVP in 2015. And you really have to know your client and know their voice and know what they're comfortable with, but also be able to push them. So our job is to present opportunities to our clients. But at the end of the day, it's their decision. So Elena was a little on the fence about sharing her whole story. And what we said to her was, hey, this is a time for you to speak up for everyone who has chronic Lyme, right? It's not just about the WNBA. And yes, that's what's going to grab the headlines, but Lyme disease is going to be in the headlines. That's huge, right? And that doesn't typically happen. So we worked with the Players Tribune and Elena to write that story over the past 12 hours, not much sleep. And then what I learned from my previous experience is really growing that story. So the story's out there, but you have to get people to read it. So Elena did 5 interviews right after where all those reporters had the story in their hands before she did the interview, and they were able to pull from it. So we didn't do any media yesterday when the news came out, because we wanted her piece to go out and then for the media to talk about that. And we made sure that the media too that we selected was all national media, right? This is a national story. So we did BBC in overseas, we did ESPN, we did CNN International, and then we did SI because the Sports Illustrated, because the host had Lyme disease, and it was really important for them to talk like that together. And then we did USA Today, and we did the USA Today story with an NBA reporter, which was really important, so we could get that audience. So that was today. That was this morning. So I was almost a little bit late, but I made it, and I showered, so that's good. Appreciate
you making the time. You're cutting out of a pretty big day, so thank you.
Yeah.
Now, Scott, you do a lot of work as well on the sort of endorsement side and on the branding of these athletes. Like, how do you decide what's the right thing for an athlete to get involved in? What prepared you for those kinds of conversations?
I mean, I think it's fair to say there's nothing like in my upbringing that truly prepares you for like trying to do a deal for a client or whatever. But I harken back to like just the life lessons you learn being involved in sports, working with groups, listening to your parents, like, and leaders and teachers and things like that. There's a lot of, at least for me, a lot of life lessons that I took from that I think I apply to what we're doing today. So for us, it's all about, like, first of all, it's our job, right? But it's the client's life, right? So there's a big difference there, right? This is our job, but it's their life. So that you have to take that into account. And at the end of the day, you know, my job is to try and find opportunities for talent, maximize them as best I can, and then present it in a way that they see the big picture, right? They understand that, hey, this might be a one-off opportunity, and that means just a singular day, a singular period of time, working with a brand in a singular instance, you know, to provide an impact and receive compensation for that. Or this is part of a longer-term project or a chance to grow, you know, your brand or grow the awareness of another brand, support a charity initiative perhaps. So again, making sure that our clients understand the big picture and how this fits into the big picture. Again, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but as long as they have all the information, we always, like Alyssa said before, we make recommendations, we don't make decisions. So all we can do is try and put these opportunities in the best light possible, and then let them, and then they decide. And from there, you know, like Jen said, we help activate or enact these partnerships, make sure everything goes well, all the deliverables are performed. And then clearly with an eye on trying to renew it, expand it, grow it, you know, whatever that looks like. So again, you know, to answer your question, Sam, for me, it goes back to the life lessons I learned in sports growing up. And again, how to be a part of a team, how to communicate well, right? How to ask good questions. And then also, can you explain to your client what success in a partnership looks like, right? And if you can do that, I think you're in a good spot.
One thing I would add for both of you, you know, both of what you said, and especially thinking about, you know, the people who are listening to us right now are largely high school students, is we didn't learn these things overnight. This is something that we've learned through experience and having, you know, great colleagues, great bosses, great teachers, and you learn things as you go. I always think back to my first job on the agency side. The reason that they hired me was because they were getting marketing inquiries for clients, and the rest of the staff, they were all attorneys, and they didn't have time to deal with marketing. And so they were missing out on opportunities from brands like Sprite, where a client might very well be interested in doing a deal, but nobody really had the time to focus on it. They were focusing on doing, you know, free agency analysis and figuring out who needed to get a job playing basketball in Europe. And so when I came in, my job became kind of transactional. It would be say, read this. Okay, this is what you want my client to do, and this is what you want to pay him or her. And me, it was very simple. I would try to just get them to pay the client more money. And that's one part of what we do every day. But you learn to do things in more sophisticated ways that make the client benefit further, and hopefully make the partner benefit more as well, so that they want to keep working with your athlete. But it's not an overnight thing.
So there's a huge element of learning a lot of different skills. Like as an agent, somebody who's representing talent and working on the talent side, there is no such thing as not my job. I mean, if they have something that they want done, you've got to figure out how to do it. And Jen, I feel like, and I don't want to speak for you since we don't know each other well, but I doubt that you had any schooling in literary publications and how to get books published and all that. I mean, what do you do when a client approaches you and says, I want to write a book, and you don't know the first thing about it?
The way that I started doing book deals, fortunately, the first one was Simon & Schuster, which is, you know, one of the top 5 publishers in the world, wanted to do a children's book with Chris Paul. And so I was able to kind of figure out my way through that process using, you know, a combination of them having the interest versus me suggesting the project. And then tapping into the experience of colleagues. You know, we have lawyers on our staff who understand or have access to sample contracts, and they can say, well, this is typical, this is not typical, and here's how you ask for what you want. And so you learn little things about negotiating along the way. You know, I think, you know, beyond that, I inherited some projects at one point. One of our bosses left the company back in 2011, and that's when I really got to take on literary full time. And again, I'm still having to teach myself a lot of things because, you know, just like with Scott, like Scott has a subspecialty, as we think of it, in public speaking. And so there's a lot about that industry that he's had to figure out himself. You know, fortunately, you know, the internet is such a resource. You know, you can Google things without having to necessarily reveal that you don't know everything at times. And, you know, there are times when it's better to ask an expert and talk to someone about, you know, your question. But a good first step is always to Google, you know, your question and see what kind of information is publicly available.
Sam, can I jump in real quick? So to kind of add on to Jen's point, like if you can only do what your job description entails, you won't last in sports very long, right? So you have to learn how to be resourceful. You have to learn how to be adaptable. You have to learn how to think on your feet. You have to be put in uncomfortable situations with deadlines and things like that, late nights, early mornings, travel. Like that's just how you kind of learn. And, you know, after graduating Penn State, I worked for the Philadelphia Eagles for 2 years in a grad assistant role. And I can't tell you the number of things that I've had to do that players would ask for or whatever. That was far beyond my role in the media services department. But again, you just learn, you adapt, you trust your instincts, you trust your gut and your best judgment. And again, will there be missteps along the way? Sure, because everyone's learning, and that's clearly the case even today. But again, if you can only do what just job description says, that it's just not something that maybe sports isn't the area for you, because you have to be able to grow and adapt and evolve. And I think we've all done that pretty well in our careers.
There's a lot of good questions in the chat. One thing I think, you know, most of the participants probably know this, but there are different distinctions between what's actually a sports agent. You know, there's a distinction between the on-field or on-court agent, which requires a certification process through the respective unions. And so the NBA has a players association, and there's a certification process with that. What the three of us do, you know, Alyssa wouldn't call herself a sports agent. She's a sports publicist. At various points, Scott and I get called, you know, a sports agent or sports marketing agent, and there's not a certification process in that. I would say that I like what we do better than the certified agent route, because we can do deals 365 days a year. There's no free agency for us. You can always be negotiating and doing, you know, exciting new business. Whereas with sports agents, a lot of the time in between those deals, you're doing some kind of tough, you know, rudimentary work, managing relationships of maybe a client's family members. And, you know, I've heard agents have to tell, you know, a young athlete how to do laundry. And, it's not necessarily all the glamorous, number crunching and like high level meetings. Like there's a lot of grunt work that goes into being that kind of an agent. Let's see what some of these other questions are.
I can speak to that a little bit while you farm for another question. And
Yeah.
there's a huge difference on the talent side and the things that you have to do. I'll tell a short story while you look into this. My early days as an intern at a sports agency, one of the most prominent athletes we had on our football roster. When I first came on board, my boss told me, who was his certified agent, said, "This is your guy, you're his guy. If he texts you, if he calls you, if he does anything, you jump to it and you do it. I don't care what it is, just figure it out," right?
Yeah.
So here we are. I'm in my second year of law school. I think I'm going through this and I'm becoming this master at research and writing. I've got it all down. The ego that comes along and the narcissism that comes along with going to law school is pretty powerful. So if anyone's considering that, it'll come. So I get this text. It's probably midnight on a Friday night. And it just says, "I want a finger monkey." And that's it. I don't know if anybody knows, I'm not good with technology. I don't know I can't pull the picture up right now and share my screen, but if anybody wants to pull up a picture of a finger monkey, it's called a pygmy marmoset. It's a monkey that's literally the size of your pinky and it can just sit on you, right? He at the time is under contract with Detroit. And so I start researching all Detroit's exotic pet laws. I start researching what breeders are actually licensed to sell these animals and if they're even legal in the United States. I spent weeks putting together one of these, basically what would have been like a trifold science fair presentation that we would have done as kids, but you do it on PowerPoint now. I come up with all kinds of information I found in breeders. I figured out their temperament, whether they carry disease, what they eat, and where you can find it. And I went on and on and on. And I email him the presentation. I shoot him a text and I said, "Hey man, check your email. I don't think this is a good idea, but if you want to do it, here's everything you need to know, but just be careful." And I get a text back that just says, "Huh?" And then another text that's just lines of laughing. And then he calls me and he's laughing and laughing and laughing. And this goes, and I'm not a guy who drops bro very often, so I'm using his voice here, but he goes, "Bro, I was so drunk when I sent you that text. I don't even remember why I did that." And that was it. And he just laughs some more and hangs up.
That's a real thing. I'm friends with Kim Miali at Rock Nation, and she has had to deal with clients with exotic pets that it becomes known and, it becomes a legal issue when, the media is reporting that this celebrity has an exotic pet that is not allowed in that state or that city. And you have to navigate a lot of unexpected circumstances in our jobs.
I think that goes back to what I was saying a little bit about Elena. You really have to be comfortable with your client and know your client, especially when I was younger. If a client asks me to do something, I would never question it. I would just do it. But now, as I know my clients, I will say, "Okay, are you sure? This will probably take 3 to 5 days and it might cost," I know kind of the what to say. That only came though with experience. I think one of the biggest assets that we all have and that successful people in the sports agency have are communication skills, right? Just simply being able to understand what someone's saying when they're saying it, being able to have different types of conversations, understanding tone. I took a class at American, it was interpersonal communication, but it was simply about when do you pick up the phone versus when do you text someone versus email or having a FaceTime conversation, just different ways, because there are so many ways to communicate and things can be interpreted, especially via email or text, which is how I think a lot of people are more comfortable communicating now, very different ways. I try not to send a text to a client without including an emoji, because I want them to know my vibe, right? Because sometimes it can be more serious or not. So, yeah, it's all about how you communicate with
I like that, the Alyssa Romano rule. I'm going to remember that. But so back to the endorsement side of things, how you package these opportunities are important, right? How you deliver the deal to the client, is important. So again, like Alyssa said, it comes back to the relationship there, how they digest information, right? Some people are an email and then a phone call. Some people are a phone call followed up by an email. Again, it's just getting to know the person you're dealing with. Again, that comes with time, that comes with building rapport, that comes with some stumbles along the way too, to be honest, but again, it's all part of the business. So that's why interpersonal skills, or again, whatever business you guys all decide to head down, developing those skills will never be a bad thing.
I saw a question in the chat that was about whether an associate's degree is sufficient for some of these careers. And I think that's a great question. And it's something that as a company we've been talking about. Obviously higher education in the United States is very expensive, and it's really been identified as a problem, that can be lumped with institutional racism. And so as a company, we've been really evaluating, is a 4-year degree required for all of these jobs? That's always been in our job postings is, a bachelor's degree. And so what we're trying to evaluate is it necessary? Is it better to have job experience? Is it better to have certain technical skills? For instance, like our digital social team, is it better just because they have certain programming languages than to basically make somebody check that box of a 4-year degree? And so the short answer is in some cases, you won't get a shot without at least a 4-year degree. But I think that you are smart to really think about where you're investing your resources, whether it's, getting a 4-year degree, getting a master's degree. So much of what happens in our industry really does come down to interpersonal skills, networking, internships, your ability to make yourself appear useful and, in certain jobs, and to have ideas, to be creative. And so I think that's really an evolving situation.
Great way of looking at it. It's again, going to law school, you learn that the right answer to every question is it depends. And so I always try to encourage people that if you're curious about the
and I would say on like the topic of law school, if you don't plan to practice as an attorney at a firm for a couple of years, do not go to law school, because you will have debt forever. If you don't get like significant, and I'm sorry to say that. I know people who have gone that route, but with the intent of becoming a sports agent. Side note, one of my first job in sports was at the NBA. I worked in licensing for consumer products, and then subsequently I worked in e-commerce. And the rule at the NBA was that if you hadn't worked at a law firm for at least 3 years, you were not getting an interview at the NBA for any of its legal jobs. They wanted people who had really put in the time, gotten the experience. The flip side, though, is that the NBA is often jokingly called nothing but attorneys, because even a lot of their business executives also did practice law. So it's a major commitment of your time and your money. And so be serious about that choice. Look at other ways of getting where you want, and don't just assume that you need to accumulate degrees, before going that route.
There's an element to it. This is my advice to students. I built and then ran a graduate program for about 5 years before moving here and doing what I'm doing now. But one of the things I would always tell people is that no matter what your degree is, if you don't represent the skills and values and experiences that your degree says you're supposed to gain from it, then it doesn't matter if you got it or not. It's a piece of paper at that point. So you actually have to take the teachings and the experiences that degree provides for you and make the most of them if you want it to count in any sort of meaningful way.
One of the questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Alyssa. No, go.
I would say one of the questions that came up is if law school is not the way to be an agent, what is? And I think we said at the beginning, every path is different. There is no you have to do this, this, and this, and then you can do this. It's not like accounting. Things that I've seen work through my colleagues and experiences at Octagon. One, knowing great athletes, right? Being in the inner circle and trying to cultivate those relationships. You might not be ready to be an agent yet, but if your friend or whoever the relationship is has a higher level agent, learning from them and learning the ropes around the way, offering your resource as their friend, be like, hey, I can work with you on this relationship with this player. I can help you with him if you will teach me the way. And then The CBA for every league is the most important thing for an agent. You need to know the collective bargaining agreement for each league inside and out. That makes you a great agent. So now when COVID is going rampant and jobs are dropping, a lot of people, I've done a lot of coffee chats, virtual coffee chats, like, well, what do I do? I'm like, read the CBA. What are you doing right now? Read the CBA, take notes, ask questions, because the more you know that, the better agent you will become in the future. So that's something you can do now while you're trying to learn.
Yeah, and even at Octagon, I wouldn't even know what percentage of our agents have law degrees. I mean, I bet you it's few, right? I mean, there's definitely some, but it's definitely not many. So Grant Robinson, your question about his law school, not the best way to go to be an agent in the NBA. I mean, there are agents who've gone that route. There's plenty of others who have not, you know? So again, once you, like Alyssa said, study CBA, pass the certification test, then it's all about how do you get in front of athletes, network, right? Build relationships. Because again, that's your pipeline to success, is that not necessarily, law school or understanding contractual law.
And it also makes a difference if you're going to work for a company or an agency
Yeah.
like Octagon, or if you're going to be with, a much smaller consortium of just a couple of people. Somebody has to be a lawyer. Somebody has to be able to share that knowledge. I mean, but like, I had worked at a much smaller agency, and while we had plenty of lawyers, we didn't have like a creative services team. And I was the only marketing person. We didn't have a publicist. We had an outside publicist, but her ability to work on so many clients was limited. When I got to Octagon, part of my evolution had to be to learn to trust having teammates, learning how to leverage the different people that you work with, and to not have to try to be, Miss Know-It-All, Miss Can Do It All. Like, there are people that have those areas of expertise, and you can team up with them. And so that's also kind of part of the decision is, if I'm going to try to be a sole proprietor and start my own company, that's different.
Another question I saw that's not really out there and how do you sign an athlete? How do you recruit, right? Recruiting and what our agents do every day is the lifeline of our business. There are a lot of different ways to recruit. Some agents will work with coaches, whether that's college coaches, AAU coaches, ask them who they think is on the rise, get close with their family members and friends. Other sport divisions will use databases. The NFL has, a recruiting or a database that shows which college athletes are on the rise that we'll use and pull from that. Getting contact info, making sure we're following the process right. Some athletes at the beginning of their college career say, I don't want to deal with this, talk to my mom. Right. And so then you have to build the relationship with the mom, but you have to figure out who is that decision maker. And then when you get that, okay, let's hear what Octagon's about. You have to bring in your team members. You have to bring in someone like Jen and like Scott and myself to make this presentation if that's what the athlete wants. So while you're learning more about them during the recruiting process, is this a person who just wants to play their sport, doesn't care about marketing, doesn't want to do interviews? Great. Then Alyssa and Jen, Scott, you're out. If they really care about their brand, great. Let's bring in our team. So recruiting and getting to understand who the athlete is and the ways to connect with them is really, really important and vital to our business.
And to add to that, each state has different agent laws, right?
Yeah.
So you have to understand if you're going to recruit a kid from UCLA, what's California's law versus Arizona State and Arizona versus, Florida State and Florida, right? Each state does it differently, and then also there are, again, Octagon prides itself on the way we handle our business and our reputation. There are plenty of agents in this business who do not operate that way and do things in an unscrupulous manner. Again, and that's their choice. But again, just know that it's not always a fair and level playing field when it comes to what some agents are willing to do to sign a contract versus what other agents are willing to do to sign a client.
It hurts when that happens. these agents put in years to recruit clients. It's not just, a couple of months. It's over time. They're working these relationships. And so at the last minute, if the athlete signs with one of your competitors, like, it's really painful on an emotional level, but then it's also like you look at the number of hours that you worked, and then to not have it pay off, it could leave you, not having a client in the next NBA draft. And that's really tough from a work perspective and how you're perceived in the sports business community. Like, everybody knows that's like a reality of it, but it's still, it's tough on your ego. One question that I saw, I think it was Lauren, what the average percentage sports agents generally get. I think Sam answered that in the chat, but the short answer is, for playing revenue, each union is, they set the standard for that. There's a limitation. So for instance, in the NBA, the most that an agent gets on a playing contract is 4%. I think it's 3% in the NFL now. But the actual comes down to really what's negotiated between the agent and the athlete. And that's a really tough part of the business, because these agents put in years of work, and then sometimes at free agency, the athlete says, I'm only paying you $100,000 flat fee. I'm not paying you 1% of my contract. And you really don't have a lot of recourse to address those things. On the marketing side, on the other hand, it's more typical to see 15 to 20% commission be paid on endorsement deals, appearances, speeches, that kind of thing. And the thing to keep in mind is that in our situations, when we do these deals, we're not getting that money. The company is getting that money. It would be really, really cool if we got that money each time.
Benefit of a small agency, you get more.
Yeah. I think if you're at a small agency, there's probably more motivation to, give some of that percentage outright to the employees. But it's also a nod to the fact that they don't have the resources, and they might not be paying you a full salary. At Octagon, things that you consider is you're getting a full salary, you're getting health care, you're getting other benefits. And so at each of you, as you become adults and career people, you'll weigh, is this a risk I want to take, where I'm getting less of a guaranteed salary and then potentially get a percentage of what I bring in. But for a lot of people, stability is really the name of the game, and steady career growth versus high risk, maybe no reward.
The other thing I'll add to that is, in most sports, I would say basketball, football, hockey, when you sign someone, you're also expected to pay for their training, right? So the second we sign an NFL player for the draft, that's like a $50,000 investment, because you're covering their housing, training, eating, car, everything from when they sign with you until they get drafted by the NFL. So when Jen talks about, that second contract, and when you're hoping to get paid more, you just invested so much money in this athlete at the upfront. And that always happens. It's really rare these days that a athlete will just sign you just to do the contract, especially as a rookie when the contracts are so slated, so that the deal's pretty much done. You negotiate only a couple of things. That's a big cost. A lot of people can't just be an agent because they can't afford like $50,000 for a player just at the upfront.
It's really tough, because in the relationship, there's always somebody chirping in their ear, like, what has your agent done for you lately? Why are you going to pay them all that money? And, they kind of sometimes get too used to the high levels of service and things that you're providing for them, and they forget. And so it's a delicate balance to be kind of persuading people that you are doing the work for them and that you're adding value every day, so that these relationship moments don't really come, to a head and say, like, you know what, I'm going to go sign with that guy instead. And you lose years of time that you've invested without the payoff.
That's the benefit of a big agency, is the agency typically rolls those costs out. They they pay up front, and then I don't know how it is there, but for us, the company paid, and then it came out of the agent's draw. It had to be all paid back before the agent could make any other money off of that commission.
But that's tough right now with COVID, because, the drafts are being moved, and you're having, instead of imagine it's a 6-week period of training, it could be, 5 months. That's not tenable.
Yeah, and Jen's right. Think about it for everyone on the meeting. Like, you have to sometimes hang on to, like, for NBA players, right? What's the first 4 years? Was it 3-4 years before they can make, like, that is an eternity, right? To hang on to someone before you start to really make your first dollar of revenue or profit based on the money you have sunk into a player. So again, these are just all things that we deal with every day, but for the people on the call learning about this, like, there's a lot that goes into it that has to be factored out economically to make sure this is a viable business to get into.
Yeah.
Jump in on there's been a couple questions about kind of where to find internships and how to find opportunities here. And I think there's a lot of different ways to approach that. I think the direct path would be to check out Octagon. I know you guys have an internship program or did pre-COVID at least.
Actually a traineeship. We don't do unpaid internships anymore. And again, we looked at kind of how we're contributing to racial disparities. And, historically people who were able to work for free were wealthy white folks. And that's how you really perpetuate a lack of diversity in the industry. And so that's only one factor. Problem is, it still doesn't pay very well. It's effectively minimum wage. So we try to do things like, say, if you want to work 4 days a week so that you can take a bartending job, we can be flexible about your hours. But, one of the things that I regret about college is that I didn't make use of resources like the Career Center. I was a relatively immature, kind of shut down, nervous type. And just, there were all these resources that I wasn't ready to tap into. But college career centers are absolutely a place to look. LinkedIn is also, like, it gets a lot of, like, people kind of want to talk bad about it, but I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. And, we certainly post about jobs there all the time, whether it's with Octagon or other companies that we hear about. So, networking with purpose is very important. I hate so much when somebody just connects to me on LinkedIn that I've never met without a note about, like, what the hope is for connecting. Like, say to me, oh, I heard you talk on this podcast. I would love to hear more about X, Y, or Z. Can we connect? But it's all out there. Again, I'm older, so I've seen, a complete lack of resources as far as the internet to now so much is available. So much information is out there.
Yeah, so when students are thinking about this sort of thing, and there's, like I said, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. I always recommended, we've lost Alyssa. I've recommended that, if you know athletes, then be attached to talent and try to get yourself embedded in their lives, get them to trust you with their business affairs. If you don't, you can network with agents and get to know them. And if you don't know any agents, then think about, if an agent's going to want to bring you on board, what kind of value do you need to provide? And if it's not knowing athletes, then you've got to be connected to brands or to opportunities or something else that's going to make their athletes' lives better and deal with things that the agents themselves aren't going to want to have to deal with. A lot of player agents, not the brand and marketing side people, but the player agents themselves generally hate doing marketing deals. And so they would love to have somebody who can come in and handle those for them. So if you can get connected with the Nikes and the Gatorades and the major brands that athletes want to be affiliated with, that's another big way to show extra value.
Forward thinking and say, like at the start of COVID, we really, Alyssa just texted that she got kicked off. I don't know if the Zoom timed out or, it's like saying about COVID. Oh yeah. And so, like, we just got this list from, I think it was Ad Age, that said, these are the brands that are really excelling through COVID. Obviously the airlines are not it. The hotel brands are struggling. But like when you look at like Postmates or you look at Talkspace, those are a lot of brands that are really thriving in this new world that we live in.
I'd also add that, like, if you want to be a sports agent, working at an agency or interning at an agency doesn't have to be your first foot in the door, right? I think any type of sports experience or any type of leadership experience or any type of transferable experience is a good first step, and then find your way, navigate, network into, agencies, because again, very rarely will you get at your first at bat with this, you know, be able to get into at least a big agency. So again, any type of transferable experience that speaks to your passion to want to work in this industry, to me, is a good thing.
Let's see if we have any other good questions. Got a few that have come up about sort of what's inspired you. What is it about your job that gets you out of bed every morning? So let's go around the table. We're running out. We got about 10 minutes left. So we'll do that, and then we'll do one more sort of final piece of wisdom from each of you. But Alyssa, since you're now back with us, what inspires you every morning to get up and go?
I've never felt like I was going to work. I genuinely love my job and love the things I do every day and love my colleagues. Since I've been at Octagon, I've never felt like it was work. And I know that that is such a blessing. Not many people get to feel that way. So that, you know, I consider myself really lucky. So that's inspiration. Also, on a personal side, my dad is like, loves my job. Loves it. And I love my dad so much, and he's been through a lot. And so to know that, you know, specifically right now while I'm quarantining at my parents, getting out of my bed at my childhood home and seeing my dad every day and be able to talk to him about work has been really special.
How about you?
I think for me, like, one of the interesting things about our job is, right, every client that we work with is at a different stage in their career, right? There's some people entering the professional ranks for the first time. There's other people just retiring, right? There's people in the prime of their career, right? And the advice and counsel and strategy that it takes against all those clients is what's interesting, right? That's why every day is different. That's why every client is different, because they're at a different point in their career. You know, for me, one of the things is, like, I have a behind the scenes look at some of the coolest people and personalities and events and moments in sports, right? And that's something that, you know, I'd never take for granted. You know, when I got to work for the Eagles, you know, my essentially last game was Super Bowl 39 on the sidelines when Tom Brady came back and beat us, and there was red, white, and blue Patriots confetti raining down on top. I mean, like, that's, like, are you kidding me? That's an amazing experience. And at the time, right, you're bummed because you lost, but, like, once you look back at it, like, what a great way to learn, what a great way to meet people. You know, so for me, it's about just perspective and understanding that, you know, again, there's definitely a lot of challenges to this job. Let's not sugarcoat it here. There are tough days, there are tough weeks. You know, right, Alyssa, right? This might be one of those weeks, but again, we just have this front row seat that is really hard to get into. And once you get that seat, it's like, you know, you're really grateful and blessed that you have it.
I would say I really love being part of career transitions. You know, one of the clients that we work with is Rashad Jennings, and we started working with him at the end of his football life. But we just saw in him, you know, personality, and he certainly has a kind of look to him. And we were able to get him as, like, literally the last person cast on Dancing with the Stars a couple of years ago. And, you know, he accepted the offer immediately. We flew to LA like 2 days after that to get it started. And it was, you know, such a moment for really exposing him to a whole new audience. Like, we had a lot of other clients do the show before. You know, there's Simone Biles and Allie Raceman and Sean Johnson, Emmett. You know, but for somebody who was probably one of the lesser known athletes to do the show, who really put in the work and never got cranky with the cameras on him all the time, to come out and eventually win, and then to help him parlay that into book deals, endorsement opportunities. Like, it's really special to be able to kind of tell them what the possibilities are, to figure out how to capitalize on moments like that.
I think that's great. I think that during my agent days, and even now helping to work on this nonprofit, I think there's just something incredibly moving and powerful about making an impact on other people's lives. And so representing athletes, like especially the ones who really came up hard and never thought they had any sort of future, and then you managed to, you know, they would have made it to the NFL with or without me, but I managed to be a part of that journey and help them experience it in a way that hopefully made it even better for them and for their families. And there's just nothing quite like that. Seeing someone who had so much adversity and so much doubt in their lives make it beyond where almost anybody in the world has ever made it. And the same goes for students, you know, working with young people who have these dreams and have similar adversity and are managed to climb out of whatever their circumstance is and reach some kind of unachievable dream. That gets me going.
Yeah, I'll add one thing, and Scott and Jen have heard me say this so many times, but especially now with social media, athletes are media platforms. So they can use their platforms to share their stories, and we have a role in helping craft that, especially over the past couple of months with everything going on in the world, and being able to teach our athletes how to use their platforms to share messages that they care about. Like you said, the impact, and knowing you had a role, even if it's small, in that, that also gets me out of bed every day.
Let's wrap. We got one more question. We're going to go around the table. Jen, I'm going to start with you. High school student listening right now, your one best piece of advice for them to think about over the next 3 to 5 years as they think about a career for them. What is it?
Don't be intimidated. You're going to be surrounded by people who are just as smart or smarter than you, just as confident as you used to be. Always try to remember that you know, at some point we're all dealing with the same insecurities and the same fears, and to just, you know, get through the day, talk to your friends, talk to your family when you're starting to doubt yourself, and, you know, start again the next day.
If this is a line of work you want to get into, be passionately curious about this industry. Talk to as many people as you can, you know, network, ask questions, like whatever it is, like basically show your passion and your willingness to get into this industry. And then the other thing that I'd add is that not all experience comes in the form of an internship, right? So there are volunteer situations you'll do. There are clubs that you'll help run. There will be organizations you'll start. There'll be fundraisers that you'll initiate. Well, you will learn a lot of life skills. You'll learn how to communicate. You'll learn how to lead and manage people. All those things are teachable moments. And if you undertake those, like, do you have the ability to communicate that, right, in an interview, or find a way to put it on a resume? Again, don't get pigeonholed into that all experience comes in the classroom or comes at internships. There are so many other ways, especially right now with what's going on in our country, you know, certainly from a social justice perspective and also from a pandemic, like there are ways to add value right now, you know, that certainly can have a lasting impact on your careers. And, you know, again, have the perspective to look at it that way, because there are definitely advantages you can take to accelerate your progress.
Mine would be that everyone makes mistakes. And so know that along the way. I've learned the biggest things in my career from messing up. So I always say, like, I'm like, oh, today this mistake stinks. It's awful. I feel terrible. I feel like I let people down. But a month from now, I'm like, okay, I remembered that. This is how I got through it. And if that ever happens again, like you know how that feels. And that's not something you can teach, but just know, like, mistakes are going to happen along the way, but looking back at them later, they're going to be the best things that happened to your career.
This is incredibly valuable advice. I'll pile on with a short one, just to never cut corners. The only person who loses when you cut corners is yourself. So put the time in and understand that the more you do up front, the less you're going to have to do later. There's no better way to demonstrate value than by showing it right up front. And understand, Scott, exactly what you're saying, that having all these skills and being able to demonstrate them and communicate them are two very different things. Mm-hmm. So you can have experience, you can have skills, but if you're the only person who knows what they've done for you and what they've made you, then they're not going to benefit you in the way that you hope they will. So understand how to tell your own story.
Well, and just think about it, everyone. You're going to get asked at some point, what did you do during this time? What did you do during quarantine to make it better? Did you help care for your parents? Or there are a million different answers, but to me, it needs to be more than just Fortnite and, video games and things like that, right? So again, it's just an opportunity to differentiate yourself. There are so many people that want to work in this business, and it's so hard to get in. So don't lose sight of the fact that right now is a time to advance the ball a little bit.
Thank you all very much to the campers. Just remember, Career Path Explorer program, do your chalk talks, thank all these people, follow them on social media, learn what best practices are, follow their careers. And if you have questions, I'm sure you can find a way to reach out. So be resourceful. Alyssa, Jen, Scott, Octagon, thank you all so much. Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Of course.
Thanks for having us.
Sam.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.